The original's episode 18, The Big Uneasy. This episode was definitely a good one. It had a lot of bloodshed. We had a lot of ties cut, and we even lost one of the characters, not one of the main characters, but one of the supporting characters who I feel like in this show hasn't really gotten a lot of great moments for his character. I love the character Thierry because he was a real catalyst in a lot of the things that happened in the show. He was a great person to affect mentally a lot of the characters because he was the son of Marcel, who is of course the son of Klaus. So it caused them to have some great ties where they were connected in some crazy ways. And when Thierry was put into the garden, I believe that's what he called it. It was a really important episode for Marcel because it was his best friend who was his second in command, and that's who helped him build the city, and he put him into this garden. And in this episode, he loses that person, and it destroys him. But it was a great episode where this unity that everyone has, everyone's in a sense, everyone's nice and happy. Like, we want this, we're gonna work for it. And in the end, the only person that really gave a crap was the person who came up with the treaty, which was, of course, Elijah. And Haley wanted the treaty as well, but the other wolves are working with Klaus, and of course he wants his own deal, which is the city itself. Which I feel like he could easily have the city if he worked with this treaty, but at the same time, Klaus knows that he can't exactly trust other people because he's Klaus. No one trusts Klaus, so Klaus can't really trust other people. And there are the witches and the wolves, and they all have their own agenda. Everyone wants to be on top, and no one can be unless they take out everyone else or they work with someone who can. And typically, Klaus is the be all end all when it comes to killing off other people. So, a lot of unity in this episode, a lot of breaking of said unity with Marcel destroying the peace treaty, Klaus it's basically going up against the one witch who hasn't been resurrected or hasn't been killed off, so the final girl can resurrect herself. And even she was saved at the end of this episode by the ancestors because now they want Klaus's baby to die. So with that being put into the show, it's really going to change the dynamic between the wolves and the vampires because the wolves and the vampires hate each other, of course. But if Klaus can somehow control them, which I doubt he can at this point because of the fact that they've decided to once again rally behind Marcel, they have this internal struggle going on where he's going to have to protect his baby. And the wolves aren't going to be able to do it on their own, I'm sure, because it would just be too easy, then it wouldn't be suspenseful. So they can't do it on their own, and he can't help them. He's just one person, even if he is the strongest person known to these characters. Even he can't go up against the witches because they're witches, and they can just mentally mess with his head, and he's down for the count, and that's all it takes. So we're gonna have to see how things play out, and he knows that Marcel slept with Cammy, so as he told Cammy, if I see Marcel again, I'm gonna kill him. So there's so much that happened in this episode. It's gonna be crazy to see how Klaus could possibly help Haley because obviously he cares about the baby and he cares about his own agenda. But when he can't get either, what is he gonna do, and who is he gonna possibly turn to? Because in this episode, once again, one of the ties of unity that was broken was between Klaus and Elijah, where Elijah has finally realized the centuries of him trying to be a great older brother and trying to look after his younger brother and make him the good person he knows he can be. He gave up on that. He's done, and he decided he's gonna take whatever he wants. And I love when they have their confrontation. He mentions how he ignored every impulse he had about Haley. I thought that was just really cool that he actually flat out said it, and it was obvious to everyone, both in the show and watching it, that he has feelings for Haley and she has feelings for him. Hers, for the most part, seemed to have gone away because of some of the stuff that happened in the last couple of episodes, which are fairly hard to remember because it's crazy to think, but this show really hasn't been on for almost an entire month, or I believe it has been a whole month, and it's just crazy to think that, but it's been off for about a month, so it's hard to remember all the old stuff that happened, but he was working towards helping Haley, and he did give her finally the cure with Sabine, and he wasn't sure about that. But he did eventually give her the cure, and that helped all the wolves. So she does still have a sense of respect towards him, and he does mention when the wolves agreed to the treaty or the peace party, he mentions how easy it was, which of course it is. Like they shouldn't be so okay with this, and they are. And so he of course warns her, which was a really good part of that episode. And I think that does give them that bond a little bit. And also the end of this episode, when Marcel does have the party attacked, they do call out for each other, and that's something Klaus even calls on. Like, I heard your name, I heard you calling her name, and it was just really good. It does give them that little bit of tension back. It gives them that bond, and I'm excited to see that come back because it's not the typical stupid love triangle type of stuff. It's actually a lot deeper than that because of the character that they both are. Elijah, especially, who is obviously he could pretty much be with anyone because he lives forever. He could do whatever he wants, but he has that sense of character where you know if he was with Haley, then he would just be with her and he would care about her. So it's kind of cool having an actual love dynamic, but at the same time, it is kind of a love triangle because he just doesn't do anything because he wants to respect his younger brother, who cares about the baby but doesn't exactly care about the woman holding his baby. So it's a cool dynamic that I actually do enjoy, and it's not just typical love romance drama crap. It's actually really important, and it's like they could have actual love with each other, but at the same time they can't because of all the crazy stuff going on in the quarter. But great episode. I love the fact that every faction is represented in this episode. The humans least of all, but that's just because the only main characters out of the human faction really are Kieran and Cammy. And the new woman, she was in this episode. I do still feel like she has some sort of plan because she talked to Elijah when he convinced her to go to the party. She mentioned how he owes the human faction one now. I feel like she has some really interesting plan. Like when she was first put on the council for the human faction and she was the lead, she was fairly eager. From what I remember, she was fairly eager to do that, and I still feel like she just has some plan to basically get rid of everyone if she wants to, or at least the vampires and the werewolves. And odds are just the vampires because the witches are fairly neutral towards humans. The wolves are fairly neutral towards humans outside of the fact that when they become werewolves, they don't exactly control themselves because they just can't. But for the most part, everyone's neutral towards the human faction except for the vampires. So I feel like all she's working towards is some greater plan to get rid of all the vampires in New Orleans. Or at least all the vampires who aren't Elijah, because he's not really trying to kill anybody off. But it was good to see her in the episode. We didn't see Kieran, but of course he's also a huge catalyst in this episode with Cammy still trying to find a way to save his life, and Klaus trying to do the same because he cares so much about Cammy, even though he doesn't admit it to anybody, but it's obvious he cares about her, just like it's obvious Elijah cares about Haley. But he just constantly tries to help, and then in the end of this episode he realizes that even if there was hope for Kieran being revived or getting that hex just banished or whatever, all that hope is gone because Klaus is Klaus, and he threatened the witch, and she decided as an act of revenge she won't help Cammy and Kieran. So it was really interesting to have that moment where Klaus decides to tell that to Cammy, and she sort of breaks down, and he kind of hates himself because of it, because he wants to right the wrongs that he's done in past episodes, like he did when he wanted to help Davina and give her the present, and he even pardoned her friend Josh, so that was kind of cool too. But him being played on, he does not appreciate that, so he killed the one witch off, and he threatened the woman, and now Cammy's fairly screwed because of that. So just all the crazy crap that goes on in this episode is just really, really good, and it all just comes together perfectly. And I do love the ending of this episode because it does give us, it sort of solidifies some of the things that are going to be happening in the rest of this season, which I don't know how many episodes we've got. This is, like I said, 18, I believe. And we might only have maybe 4 or 5 more episodes. So I'm curious to see exactly what plans they have coming up, and what do the witches plan on doing with Klaus's baby. Like, what is their plan to actually go out and attack? Because they aren't as powerful as I can't even think of her name, but the Devereaux girl. She mentions constantly how they aren't as powerful as they could be if the fourth girl was revived. But the ancestors decided killing off this witch is less important than killing off Klaus's baby. So I'm just curious, like, how much more powerful could they be if they kill the baby instead of this witch off? So we'll have to wait and see. But there's so many points in this episode that are going to be huge components of future episodes. They could all be little bits and pieces in every episode from now on, but at some point, Kieran either dying or living is going to be an entire episode. Marcel going against Klaus as well as Elijah is going to be its own full episode. The witch is going to attack Haley and having to deal with Klaus, of course, is going to be its own episode as well. So just right there, you have 3 full episodes that are going to be really big components for the rest of the series, because all of those components do play on each other because these factions are so tightly knit, even though they're all enemy factions. But loving the series, glad it's finally back, because like I said, for a month it was off, and then that's just insane. But glad it's back. Great episode to come back on. A lot of good points. Love the little display Marcel did. I thought that was really cool, actually. And can't wait to see what happens throughout the rest of this season. But comment below, let me know what you guys thought of this episode, favorite parts, least favorite parts, and tell me what plot point did you guys enjoy most in this episode, and which point are you looking for most in the future? Which one do you want to see expanded on first? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.